So you're vision impaired and you want to get into the sport of shooting, but you're just not quite sure how to go about it. Watch this video and I'll explain how. Hello, I'm Michael Wapples, the chairperson of the shooting committee within the International Blind Sports Association, or IBSA. In this video, I'm going to explain about how you can get into the sport of shooting if you're vision impaired. Now in this video, I'm going to talk more about some of the practical issues of things like finding out where you can try the sport, how you go about finding a shooting club, some of the considerations about equipment, and how you can fund getting that equipment, as well as the firearms licensing issues you need to consider, whether you even have firearms licensing in your country, and whether there's any laws you need to obey as well. If you're thinking at this point though, how on earth does someone that is vision impaired shoot, then I'd suggest watch my introductory video, which I'll include a link to in the description. In this video though, I won't discuss any of the actual shooting techniques. It's just going to be more the matters of how you go about getting into the sport, all those things about finding where you can do it and trying it. So, first question is, do you know whether you enjoy it? Now, some of you may have been sighted in the past and you may have actually done shooting previously, and in which case you may actually have a strong feeling already as to whether you want to do shooting as a vision impaired person. Now for you, I would say remember, vision impaired shooting is target air rifle shooting. So if you enjoyed the movement that involved in clay pigeon shooting, then it will be a bit different, and again you may want to try it, although you still may have a bit of an idea whether target shooting would appeal or not. For the rest of you, I would definitely suggest have a try. There's a number of ways you could go about this. One would be to find out whether there's any have a go days or try out days where you can go along and just try the sport and then decide whether you enjoy it then and whether you want to find a shooting club and actually go further into actually taking up the sport. Here in the UK, British Blind Sport organise a lot of have a go days. Some of these have multiple sports at the event, so you could actually try more than just shooting. And these have a go days or try it days are actually really good options for you to just try the sport, because it doesn't take any investment other than just the effort of getting to the event to actually try it. However, these may not necessarily be available near you or at a time that's convenient for you, so you may want to try this next option, which would be to find out whether you have any shooting clubs with the specialist vision impaired aiming devices in your local area. So how would you go about finding a shooting club or finding out about the have a go days? The first place I would suggest to look is find out from your blind sports organisations. So here in the UK, as I've mentioned, there is British Blind Sport, who coordinate a lot of the sporting activities for the vision impaired. Now, if you don't know about the blind sports organisations in your country, then I'd suggest going to the IBSA website, as IBSA have member organisations in a large number of countries around the world. I will include a link to the IBSA website in the video description. Hopefully at this point they may know about the sport and maybe you'll be on your way to actually just trying the sport. But vision impaired shooting isn't necessarily known by all the blind sports organisations. Sometimes it's run by the shooting organisation or maybe by the Paralympic Committee, as the sport is now actually governed by World Shooting Power Sport. So this is my next suggestion of where you could find out about where you could possibly try vision impaired shooting. Go to your National Paralympic Committee. You can find a list of the shooting organisations for National Paralympic Committees on the World Shooting Parasport website. Again, I'll include a link to that in the video description. The third category of organisation I would suggest looking at would be your national shooting organisations. Now within these, you may need to be slightly more careful about finding ones that are relevant, because vision impaired shooting is air rifle shooting, where some of the organisations may deal with other forms of shooting, such as clay pigeon or full bore rifle shooting. You want to be looking more for the smaller, small bore type rifle shooting organisations. So here in the UK, that would be the National Small Bore Rifle Association, or maybe in Scotland, the Scottish Small Bore Rifle Association. Hopefully at this point you will have found a local shooting club, and hopefully they will have some of the vision impaired shooting aiming devices. However, if at this point you've not found anywhere that actually has got the vision impaired shooting aiming device, don't despair. You may be able to continue, but things may be a bit tougher because you're going to have to now somehow source the equipment before you can even try it. There may be grants available. Some of the grants may be able to help clubs get the equipment. So this brings me on to the next thing. When you're looking for a shooting club, what are you looking for? Within this, you're going to need a supportive club. It's probably going to need a bit of input from them, particularly if they're going to need to look at buying some of the vision impaired shooting aiming devices. But also shooting clubs are very valuable because they've got expertise in shooting, they can coach you, they may have some of the other shooting equipment such as rifles, shooting jackets, and things like that, just the sort of shooting equipment that a sighted shooter would use, and they will have that equipment and probably can loan you that as well. So I would always say find a shooting club, don't just think, oh, I've got a large garden or large garage or something like that, I can maybe set up a shooting range at home. Shooting clubs, if it's a good shooting club, are invaluable because they have so much knowledge and equipment you can try out before you start really spending lots of money. So, but remember though, when you're looking at shooting clubs, they may not actually have any experience of vision impaired shooting. It may all be new to them, so you also need to be prepared to put some work in yourself. Maybe watch these videos so you're a bit informed about how this works. Be prepared that when you're talking to them that you may have to go away and investigate some stuff yourself. The other thing I would recommend as well is, if you have a sighted person that can go and assist you every time, that might be beneficial because a lot of shooting clubs are voluntary organisations, so they may have someone that can help you, but it may be a different person each time, and it is very useful if you have the same person because you can develop between you a communication system. You know how much help each of them you need, and you will bond a lot better as a team, because whilst in competition it's a shooter that's recognised, I personally feel it is quite a team effort between you and your assistant. Okay, moving on to the equipment and the funding. At this point I'm assuming either you managed to have a go and you're actually feeling, I really want to have a go at this sport, or maybe the shooting club doesn't have the specialist aiming device, but they're willing to start looking at grants and stuff to actually buy the equipment. So how would you go about selecting one? I would say, if possible, try and get one on loan, or if you know someone that's got one, try it theirs before you actually select your device, because they all work a bit differently. They all have their advantages, their disadvantages. The one tip I would say though is, if you can afford it, go for one of the internationally approved aiming devices which you could use at an international competition. At the beginning you may not be thinking about going to do international competition, but should you ever get to that stage later, you don't want to have to then go out and buy a load of new equipment. However, if you really can't afford one of those because the internationally approved aiming devices are more expensive, there are some cheaper alternatives out there. Again, I will include some links for the different aiming devices in the description. A cheaper aiming device is always good just to get you in the sport, but as I said, remember that thing of it may have its limitation if it's not internationally approved. Now, the other thing you may need to just consider when thinking about the aiming device is if it's compatible with certain air rifles. And if you're buying an air rifle at the same time, or if the club already have one, make sure that it will work with the particular device you're going to buy. They will work with most of them, but there are sometimes slight problems. I'll just get my rifle out and let you show you one problem that I have with the aiming device. Now on mine I have the Vius attached, and the problem is that the clamp is actually wider than the mounting rail, so it slightly hangs over the side of the rifle. And I don't know if you can see it on the camera that the loading lever, just connected to it, there's a linkage which actually cocks the rifle, and that linkage just rises up just above the rail at the side. And because of the scope hanging over the edge, I can't actually mount the scope any further forward because the two bits would hit each other and you wouldn't be able to actually load the rifle. Or sometimes another problem you may have is that lever, instead of going down, some rifles it only can go upward, and again the width of the aiming device may just slightly hit it. Also, you need to make sure that there's a suitable rail for it to clamp to. I think most air rifles nowadays do come with a suitable rail, but possibly not all. So one possibility of how you could actually try out the different aiming devices if you don't know anyone or a club is maybe approach the manufacturers, ask them whether they would be willing to let you have it on a trial period first, maybe loaned, or that you've paid for it up front, but there's a 30-day or 60-day return period if you're not happy with it. So I'd say always try and get it that you can try it before you really have committed yourself. I don't know whether the manufacturers offer that. You would need to negotiate it. They may be happier doing a loan if it's to the club rather than to an individual, but do try and talk with the manufacturers or the person selling the device, see if they're willing to do that, because you really don't want to commit to something before you have really had a good go with it. Now moving on to the funding side of things. There's three options I'm going to discuss here. The first is if there's grants available. A lot of sporting organisations will come up with grants available for getting increased participation in sport, or maybe supporting people in sport and stuff like that, and these are a good option. Personally, I feel there's maybe more scope for grants to shooting clubs, because if a club is getting a device, then potentially this money will be helping lots of people rather than just one individual. But yes, from time to time you will find grants maybe for individuals. As well as sporting organisations, you may look at businesses. They sometimes have grant schemes for good causes. And remember, in this, you're a disabled person. It always looks good, and sometimes there's actually even grants specifically aimed at disabled sport. And when making those grant applications, remember that and make sure it's known in the application that it's for disability sport. The second option I'm going to say about is, in some countries you have government grants or government benefit schemes, various funding options for disabled people to help them with various aspects of living and the additional cost incurred as a disabled person. Now these do differ obviously around the world, but again this may be something that you want to explore, and it would be more for you as an individual if you're looking to buy your own equipment. And then the third option I will say about is crowdfunding, something like a GoFundMe campaign or Just Giving or something like that. Now there's a few things you may want to consider with that. The first is there's the general purpose platforms like GoFundMe. They're well known, but there's a lot of different types of things on there. But there's some more specifically targeted ones for specific types of things. Like I've come across Make a Champ, and that one is specifically targeted at sports people. So you may feel that a sports one is going to bring in an audience that are more likely to give to sport, or you may feel that the more well-known ones are just more likely to be trusted by people. But you need to remember though that crowdfunding tends to mostly be people either knowing you or people who have heard about you. There's going to be some sort of connection. They won't be entire strangers. And the other thing is, a lot of people may be prepared to give a little bit. Only a few will give larger amounts. So I'd say with that one, if you're going down the crowdfunding route, you're really going to have to find lots of people to give little amounts, and all those little amounts will add up. That is an option, but it could be a lot of work for you to manage such a campaign to get the device. And if you're new into the sport, you may need to find your friends from elsewhere that will be giving to it, and whether they feel willing to, say, give to helping you in your shooting when you have not really got much background in it, I don't know. That's something you will have to decide whether it's worthwhile. Finally, I'm going to come to the legal issues, things like the firearms licensing. Again, as I've said in this video, things do differ around the world. So it's going to be fairly general advice. In some parts of the world, most of Europe, you don't actually need a firearms license for an air rifle. However, that in itself is not necessarily a blanket thing, because even in Europe, so here in England, you are allowed an air rifle without a license, but go north of the border to Scotland and you need a firearms license up there, or an air rifle license. I'm not exactly sure on what they term that license, but you do need a license up there. Similarly, if you go to places in Asia, they're quite strict with their firearms licensing laws, and from what I've read, the consequences if you violate those laws over in Asia, the consequences could be quite strict, so you really want to make sure you're on top of it. And again, going to Australia, they have firearms licensing for air rifles, and it can actually differ depending on the state, and in some of the states it can be really strict. I've heard that in New South Wales, the vision impaired shooters, their licenses don't allow them to take their rifles home to train. So you could find, depending on where you are, the firearms licensing could be quite strict. So it's always worth asking about it and making sure you know. Even if you don't have licensing to deal with, there still will be laws dealing with firearms, well, with the air rifle and how you can store it, where you can use it. And again, you need to make sure that you know what those are and comply with those. So again, this is one place that, say, the shooting club or your national shooting organisation can help. They may be able to advise you on this and make sure that you do comply and that you're following the rules correctly. So that, I think, covers the firearms licensing. And I think that about wraps up this video. I know it's been fairly general. It's been quite tricky to do it because I know that I'm targeting an international audience and things really do differ around the world. I think my final thing I would say is good luck in trying to get into the sport. It may not be easy. It probably will take a bit of persistence. It may take some effort. Don't give up. I think it's well worth the effort. And when you do approach the shooting clubs, as I said, remember, you may be the first vision impaired person they've ever experienced. So try and be slightly understanding that they may make some mistakes, and don't go hard with them if they make a mistake, or certainly not at the beginning. They may be as nervous as you, or maybe even more nervous. So I think that is something important you need to consider. But as I said, good luck in trying to get into the sport. I'm definitely happy to answer any questions you may have if you decide to contact me, either through the IBSA Facebook page, the IBSA Shooting Facebook page, or through my IBSA email address. If you go to the IBSA website and go to the shooting section, you'll find the email for me there as well. Hope this has been useful for you. If you've enjoyed the video, please like the video. Consider subscribing to the channel. Watch other videos that I'm producing. Hopefully some of those will cover things like the actual techniques, and we'll give you some of the details that you may need to take to your shooting clubs. So thank you for watching, and goodbye. See you in another video.